Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining today's training. I'm Ed Meyer, and I'm partnering with Business Forward on this initiative. And today we're pleased to be joined by Lauren Christella. She's the Chief Advancement Officer of the Committee of 70. Lauren is responsible for board development, external affairs, and programming, including the We Vote initiative, which we're going to hear more about. And Lauren also serves as president of the League of Women Voters in Philadelphia, where she's focused on rebuilding the organization and equipping volunteers to have a positive impact on elections at the grassroots level. So, Lauren, thank you for joining us, and I'm going to be kicking it over to you for some of your opening thoughts here in just a minute. The purpose of this webinar is really to help you and to help your employees register and vote. We're going to cover some best practices from some of America's most respected companies, and we'll also share links to nonpartisan resources on the issues and candidates. We have sample emails and social media posts that you can use, and you can find the full employer toolkit on the Business Forward website, www.businessfwd.org, along with state-specific guides, including one for Pennsylvania, which is the focus of today's discussion. And we'll also be publishing Spanish language versions later on this week. Before I kick it over to Lauren, I just wanted to say a couple of things that might help to spend a minute on why it can be so hard for your employees to register and vote, and why this is so important for you to really pay attention to. And some of these, many of you know, but first and foremost, registration is not automatic, and plenty of would-be voters think they're registered, but they're not. People tend to move around, and it just gets challenging for folks. Second is that the voting rules are complicated, and they vary from state to state. And as we've been doing, I'm from Dallas, Texas, and as we've been doing this project, I've been fascinated at just how different the voting rules really are from state to state. The third is that voting in person can take more time than it should. There are long commutes, long lines. We see all those, long lines on on election night, people waiting 4 hours to vote. And so it's important to let people know their options on when and how they can vote. And the fourth is that, would-be voters find a hard time finding reliable information on the issues. There's a lot of confusion, a lot of disinformation on social media, and so having a reliable source of information like an employer is helpful. And finally, of course, the COVID pandemic is making this harder, and we have fewer voting places in a lot of cases, and people are in some cases, frightened to vote and how safe it is, questioning how safe it is. And so that adds an extra complication and, again, makes it even more important for employers to be very active in finding good ways to promote voting behavior within their employees. So with that overview, I'm going to kick it over to Lauren to tell us just a little bit more about her and about her organization, the Committee of 70, and the work that she's doing. And then we're going to come back to her for a few more details later on in our discussion. But Lauren, let me kick it over to you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Ed. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you. I just want to start by saying a little bit about the Committee of 70. We are 116 years old, and we're a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization based in Philadelphia, but we have resources and materials that serve the entire Commonwealth, and we're eager to get them in the hands of voters and would-be voters this election season. And honestly, in every election, we want to make sure that people know that every year is the year of the voter. I'm also the president of the League of Women Voters of Philadelphia, which Ed had mentioned. And then my only advice there would be to get a hobby that does not have the exact same busy time as your day job. But I'm very excited we have a lot of really great resources to share, and I'm excited to walk through this with you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lauren. Really appreciate your time, and thanks for joining us. I know things are busy there. So, let's move through the employer toolkit. The top level, there's 5 key things you can do. First is help your employees get ready to vote. The second is to give them time to vote on election day, and if it's available, encourage them to vote early, and we're going to talk about how that works in Pennsylvania. The third is joining, coalitions with other companies, other employers that are doing this work to show a united front that voting is important. The fourth is speaking out publicly about policies that encourage voting and make it easier. And the fifth is to stand up for voters that are oftentimes suppressed and silent. Stand up for those that that the system has made it more difficult for them to vote. Those are the 5 top-level things. If you take anything away from this discussion today, that that employers should be doing. We've built this employer toolkit really from lessons from Fortune 500 CEOs, and what we've learned from them is several things. First is that helping employees vote is not political. So a lot of times people worry that they're going to get involved in politics, that they're encouraging that there's a risk in doing this. This is not political. This is just encouraging people to vote, but not telling them who to vote for. It's also that you don't need to spend a lot of time on this. So the bar is not that high in terms of just putting some information out there, some quick emails, some reminders at team huddles and team meetings goes a really long way. Also, CEO engagement is important. This should not be delegated down, to someone lower in your organization. Having CEO leadership really has a big impact. And overall, it's great for team culture. It's great for team building, encouraging people to vote, having some sort of a system that recognizes and rewards people for voting is important for team culture. Getting started on this work, it's first and foremost, the place we send a lot of people is vote.org. It's a great website. There's lots of sites out there, but that's where you can see a lot of the basics about registration, when, where, and how to vote. Vote.org is a great sort of one-stop shop to get started. Secondly, there's partner organizations, and we're going to hear more from Lauren about specific efforts going on in Pennsylvania that they're involved in, specifically with the Committee of 70. But there are other partner organizations. Look for one that maybe matches the culture of your organization. I live in Dallas, Texas. An organization like Voto Latino is very popular here, encouraging Hispanic and Latinx voters to register to vote. So think about look for the one that you think best matches your culture, and send your employees there. And just a real quick do and don't. Very simply, do encourage your employees to vote, but do not tell them who to vote for. This is all about voter turnout and getting people to turn out, but not an influencing campaign that you should be doing. So early voting is really, in my opinion, the most effective way to increase voter turnout and make it, especially in this environment, safe and easy for people to vote. The rules are different from state to state, and I'm actually going to bring in Lauren here for a minute to talk a little bit about Pennsylvania. And I know there's been some late breaking news on that just today. But in-person absentee voting begins as early as September 14th in Pennsylvania. Lauren, tell us a little bit about what that is and what that is not, if you may.
Sure. So I know technically that was supposed to start this week, but our ballot was being held up by some litigation that was in play about the Green Party. That was settled today. That's part of these kind of suite of changes that were just made by the state Supreme Court here. So as soon as those ballots are printed, anyone would be able to go to a satellite election office or your county Board of Elections office and request basically it's all-in-one absentee mail or vote by mail process. So you walk in, you can even just register to vote on the spot, request your application to vote by mail. The staff hands you the ballot. You step aside, fill out your ballot, and then immediately turn it in. And that's our version of early voting, but it's really just very efficient vote by mail. And then we can go through some of those other changes in a little bit if that's what you prefer. But
yeah, no, that's great. Maybe toward the end, if there's anything else you want to dive into on the other changes, that would be helpful. But that is very good information. It's something we might want to tweak in this employer toolkit as the as that new date, I guess, gets moved back a little bit, but set on the in-person absentee voting. And this is really about help. One of the points we discussed earlier is that it's important to stand up for voters that are most likely to be silenced or suppressed. Young voters have 20% less than the national average, and people of color are more likely to face obstacles to voting than white Americans. And so making sure that as an employer, you are standing up for the rights of your employees, and especially vulnerable communities, is critical. Both in the public policy space on the big sort of democracy issues, but also just in the day-to-day, making sure that those voters and all your employees are treated equally and are able to go and have the time to actually vote and participate in democracy is critically important. It's something you should be aware of. So in the past, there's been, as I mentioned earlier, concern among some CEOs about being overly political and worried about damage to their brands if they are active in terms of encouraging voting and voter participation. What we're seeing now is that it's actually been turned on its head. Consumers want their brands to engage. Consumers are demanding that companies are actually are promoting democracy and promoting voting. And so in a sense now what we're hearing from many CEOs is the risk has actually gone the other way. There's a bigger risk of not doing anything, of not encouraging voting and not encouraging an open democracy. And so if you're on the sidelines and you're not being active in this space, there may actually be risk to your brand in being silent. The one area that if you could encourage, if you yourself could serve as an example as a CEO or an executive, or encourage your employees to get engaged, it would really be as a poll worker or a poll watcher. Now, these are a bit different. The poll worker are trained by local election boards to identify problems and they serve at polling places on election day. It's a nonpartisan role. I've served in this role in Dallas before, and you simply work to make sure that there's a successful election process in place. Poll watchers are recruited by the political parties, and they're there to really protect people casting their vote and monitoring any problems that come back and reporting those back to the campaigns. So that they can address the problems at the polls. So both of these roles are important, and really roles that increasingly, especially in this year's election with COVID, it's going to be important that we've got full staffing across the country, especially of poll workers, to make sure that we can have as many polling places open as possible. This is kind of the last piece before we dive into the resources, and that is just some facts on mail-in voting. This has obviously been a hot topic across our country. The facts are that 1 in 4 Americans vote by mail, and that 28 states already encourage vote by mail without even asking for a reason. It's enjoyed bipartisan support for many years. The president votes by mail. Several people have voted by mail for a long time with very small voter fraud that has come up. In fact, in 2016, there are 5 states that vote exclusively by mail, and they had higher turnout and lower cost and a 0.001% potential voting fraud. So in 2016, those 5 states reported only 112 cases of potential fraud out of 11 million ballots. So it's a safe, reliable way of voting if your state offers it, that you should consider if you're uncomfortable voting in person. Finally, the resources that you can go to, and here I'm really we've listed those all available here for you. But what I would love to do is to turn it over to Lauren to talk more specifically about We Vote and BYO Ballot that she's working on with the Committee of 70, because I think those would be probably the most relevant for those of you that are joining, and Pennsylvania specific for those of you that are joining this call. So Lauren, if you wouldn't mind diving into those a little bit more, I'd really appreciate it.
Sure, thanks so much. The We Vote initiative honestly aligns so closely with all of the great resources you just heard. We also heavily rely on the Harvard Ash Center report on creating a culture of voting and the civic responsibility of businesses. But we add this layer of resources and guidance specifically for Pennsylvania. So one of the most popular pieces, in addition to a lot of the resources that Ed already shared, is our specific tailored communications for the partners that we work with. And these partners include everything from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia to Independence Blue Cross, PICO, a number of really terrific law firms and businesses, nonprofits, churches, et cetera, in greater Philadelphia and expanding hopefully across the Commonwealth. We help each organization tailor their communications, and we also offer election briefings and info sessions. There's so much, obviously, and even just all the news today about the changes that are happening here in Pennsylvania. It's intimidating and confusing, and if you've never voted by mail before, or you don't know how to vote safely, or you're interested in being a poll worker and don't know where to start, our briefing really walks people through that process and also gives them an opportunity to ask questions. There's a lot of, our government offices are being overwhelmed with inquiries, and if we can help answer some of the voters' questions, we're more than happy to do so. So those election briefings are on demand. This program is entirely free for anyone who signs up, so we encourage anyone to do that. We're also working with CEOs and HR departments to figure out ways to provide flexibility that works for both the employer and the employees when it comes to their desire to either be a poll worker or just vote in person and have the time that they need to do that. So, for instance, Independence Blue Cross just announced that they are having a mandatory no meeting day. So they're not giving everybody the day off necessarily, but they're saying no meetings. If you can manage your inbox and your projects, go for it. Go be a poll worker. Go do those things. So that was encouraging. I believe PICO is going to do something similar. And then we have firms like Morgan Lewis that has offices in Pittsburgh as well. They've given their administrative staff the day off to volunteer to either be a poll watcher, a poll monitor, or a poll worker on election day, which is just terrific. And it's a great way to promote that culture of voting. Additionally, the resources we provide, the BYO ballot is specific for Pennsylvania. So anyone in Pennsylvania can put in their address to this tool, that's ballot.70.org, and will receive their ballot, right? Exactly what their ballot looks like. We're updating it today to reflect that the Green Party was kicked off the ballot. So give us a second to make that update. That just happened this afternoon. And you get an explanation of what the office is, right? Because this is like a job interview that you're hiring for. So you need to understand what the position is. And then you get information from the candidates. We've sent every candidate in Pennsylvania a survey. Their responses are posted verbatim in that site. And then you're able to save your picks. If you want to save them for yourself to use whenever your ballot is mailed to you, now that it's that litigation is wrapped up, that will happen quickly, hopefully. Ballot should go out next week or the following. And then you can save your picks to bring with you to the voting booth, or you can share them with friends and family. Post them on social media if you feel like you'd like to do that. At the end of this process, you've made your way through all of the candidates, you've saved your picks. It asks you to make a plan to vote. And we know that that is such an important step in really driving turnout. When people make a plan and are intentional about it, they usually follow through. So this will give people options and resources to vote by mail if that's what they choose, or to vote in person. They'll connect with the polling location finder, and it will put a calendar appointment on your calendar for you, which is a good one, and send reminders, actually. Polling places in Pennsylvania won't be set, at least in Philadelphia for sure, until 20 days before the election. A lot of locations are changing, so we definitely want to encourage everyone to check their polling place before they head to the polls.
That BYO ballot sounds awesome. Is it the campaigns that respond? Is that right, to the questionnaires you're asking, or is that your own your organization's own analysis of the issues, or how do those issues get filled out?
Yeah, the candidates answer the questions themselves, or the campaigns, and we also ask them to submit their top 5 endorsements. So they all come from the candidate as well. If you need more information, we include links to each candidate's social media accounts and campaign website.
Wonderful. Well, that sounds tremendously helpful, and I'm going to spare you from having to opine on all the late-breaking developments today, since they're still breaking.
Postmarks matter. That's the big one. I think that was a very exciting development, and drop boxes are approved to move forward, are found constitutional. So thankfully.
So tell me about the postmarks for just a second, the
Sure.
postmark piece.
Yeah. So previously, prior to today, if the postmark didn't matter. So if your postmark was November 3rd, election day, but it arrived on the 4th, your ballot was discarded. With this ruling from the state Supreme Court, postmarks will matter, and any ballot with a November 3rd postmark or earlier received until 5 days after the election will be counted. And that is that's a big win for voters in the state for sure, but it's also going to mean that we might be waiting a little longer for those election results. So everyone needs to get it in their head that we're talking about election week. Election day is no longer a thing. And that doesn't mean that anything's broken or the system's rigged. We just need to wait a little longer for those official results to come in.
I think that is great words of wisdom, and maybe also something that employers on this call can be emphasizing with their employees as well, is not to jump to conclusions on election night, that it is an election week. And I think that's a very, very good point. And it will most likely take several days before we really know the results. So it's good to go ahead and bake that into people's minds before November the 3rd. Agreed. Well, thank you so much, Lauren. This has been tremendously helpful, and to hear your insights on the Pennsylvania specific pieces. Let's go to the last page for just a minute. This is a sample email that employers can send out to employees, and it includes a link to where people can click to find their polling location. And also, this is again best practice to allow the paid time off for your people to go vote, and for managers to accommodate that time away for employees to go vote. If you have questions that you did not get answered in this webinar, please again email us at info@businessfwd.org, and we'll be happy to reply to you and answer those questions. And if you missed any part of this webinar or would like to share it with other business leaders, you can visit the Business Forward website, again at businessfwd.org, to access a recording of this webinar and the state-specific Pennsylvania Employer Toolkit. So thank you again to Lauren for joining us, and thank you all for your time this afternoon. And please go out and encourage your employees to vote. Have a great day.